welcome to Restoration City Church. And this segment is called Restoration Talks. We are back again. We had some amazing feedback last week from people who shared how encouraged they were about us tackling and dealing with topics such as anxiety and self-harm and how to cope during this lockdown and isolation and loneliness and dealing with these topics that are not often spoken about in church, but also from a spiritual and a psychological perspective as well. So we're really grateful for all those that have messaged and shared how much we have helped them, and we've decided to bring it back for a little while and see how it goes. So please share with your friends and family. I know we've had a little bit of technical difficulties this evening, so just bear with us while we figure this thing out. Praise God. We are live on Facebook under Restoration City Church, and we'll be live on our YouTube page as well. So, little introduction. We have our special guest with us this evening, who I like to call Auntie Tuvia. So, Auntie Tuvia, tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, and what do you do?
Well, hello everybody, and thank you first of all for inviting me along this evening. I'm Tuvia. I am a wife and a mother. I have been married for 30 years in 2 months' time, and I've been with my husband for 40 years. And we have 4 children, and we also have a son-in-law. I'm part of the Restoration City Church pastoral team, and a lot of what I do is welfare and supporting families, and I like to think that I keep things together, bring people together, help people to grow and go through their walk. So yes, and I love my church. And I thank the Lord that I'm growing here.
Amen. Thank you. Dr. Amanda, could you tell us again a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so everybody who tuned in last week would have heard already who I am. I'm Amanda, I'm a counselling psychologist. I'm also a clinical supervisor, so a lot of my work is around supervising counsellors, supervising volunteers that support people in crisis as well. So pretty much my role is about looking after people, supporting and just helping those who are helping other people, which sort of leads on to my research, which is around church leaders and how they support their congregations and how they look after themselves, which I suppose is my interest and my main passion and where I'm sort of journeying towards at the moment. I'm also a mother of 5 beautiful kids, a wife, and a busy lady, but enjoying life and enjoying all the tasks that I'm doing at the moment.
Thank you so much for sharing. I am Chaz'ara Melody. I go to Restoration City Church. I'm a part of the apostolic team here, the leadership team, and the worship team. So I wear many, many hats. I work in a secondary school as my day job as head of year 10. So I deal with a lot of behaviour, exclusion, safeguarding, welfare and things like that for 14 to 15-year-olds. I'm also a qualified counsellor, so I incorporate a lot of my training that I did in my day-to-day job in one-to-one sessions and mentoring and things like that with my students. I've also dipped my foot in the matchmaking world, so I've joined the Adam Eve team as a dating consultant, which I've started working with the lovely Dr. Sarah Jane. So I'm wearing many hats at the moment, but I am excited with the new ventures that I am exploring in my life at the moment. So we're going to do a group check-in, a group wellbeing check-in, and this is something that you can do with us. You can either post your comments or your check-in numbers in the comment section, or you can do this with your friends and family, those around you, or you can just do this later on in your reflection time. It's always good to kind of be self-aware of how we are feeling in different moments, whether it's at the end of the day, the beginning of the day. It's always good to kind of check in with ourselves and see where we are at. So 1 being not so good, 5 and around the 5 number being I'm okay, I'm kind of in the middle, and then 10 being I'm great. So I want us just to have a moment and just think, okay, where are we on that scale? So, Dr. Amanda, where are you today? How are you checking in?
Okay, so I think I'd say that I'm checking in about a 9, quite a healthy 9. And I think actually what it stems from is, I think early on in the day, if you asked me earlier, it's quite possible that I would have perhaps more said a 3 or something around there. You know, I had worked very early into the hours of the morning, supporting crisis, had a lot of that on my head, was very tired, and I knew I had a lot of tasks and things I needed to do. But as I was home preparing and planning and thinking all the things I needed to do and checking off my list and feeling a little bit overwhelmed, my mind cast on my family, my children, and even as I sort of glimpsed into the garden and saw the kids playing, and you know, I think I just stopped and had a moment where I thought, you know what, they're doing really well. You know, considering they've been off school now, I don't know, 9, oh my goodness, well they've been off a long time, and I know that they were among the first to go off, because I remember that mine went off almost a week before a lot of others did. So they've been off for a really long time, and what I've looked at is how well they are actually coping, how well they're getting on with each other, how well they're just doing it. You know, I think when I looked and I reflected on how well they're coping, I think that was something that for me just lifted me, you know, just made me realise, you know what, we're all in a really difficult time, you know, and we're trying to find a way to cope. And we're doing well, you know, we are doing well with circumstances that we haven't faced before. So, yeah, I'm here, I'm excited, I'm keen to be able to, you know, offer our time, to share our time, to support those who right now may not be coping so well. And I think that's another thing that just, you know, ignites that passion and that excitement, and so great to be here.
That's amazing, thank you for sharing. And Auntie Tuvia, how are you checking in today?
I'm going to check in at 8.5, 9, because God is good, and He's good, and I can't complain. But you know, it was a very difficult day today. There's lots to do at work. I'm a key worker, and I'm in the retail sector, and I do payroll, and so it's a bit difficult because a lot of people are off. But it was a very good day today. I got all my tasks completed, and I went home, I waved to my husband, and I got ready and came back out again. But there's a lot of things that, you know, I have been thinking about, you know, during the day that didn't pull me down, but was just, there was an expectation of the day. And so, yeah, the day is not finished, and I'm glad that I'm here, and so I'm checking in at 8.5, 9, because I feel good.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, nothing to complain about.
All right. Well, I am checking in at what am I at today? 7.5. I thought that's pretty good. That's still on the higher end of the scale. My week has been good. I can't complain really. I think there's just so much to get done, and trying to get to grips with working from home, and I've been doing a lot of support with parents that are really struggling, and sometimes that can weigh in a little bit. It's kind of interesting, you know, I don't have children, but then I'm helping support those that do have children, and I can't even imagine what it's like trying to homeschool. I would rather send your kids to school 8 to 4. I can handle your teenagers, but ask me to be with them 24/7 at home, I can't do it. I can't. I'm just not cut out for it at this stage of my life. So yeah, it's been really, really interesting, and just trying to support those around you that are kind of struggling during this time, and also checking in with yourself and being like, okay, where am I at today? Am I completing the things that are on my list? Am I just sleeping the day away? And just trying to be mindful of those things. All right, are we ready to get stuck into our topic?
Yes, we are.
Today we're going to be dealing with anxiety. We know that during this coronavirus pandemic, that isolation and loneliness and anxiety and depression, all these different things are starting to come up for a lot of people that may not have encountered different mental health issues before. You know, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of panic around at the moment. So we are going to be getting to grips with what is anxiety. We've had a few questions that have come in, so we'll be answering your questions, giving practical tips and help and advice. We're going to get the ball rolling with what is anxiety. And if you could just give us a little breakdown, first of all, what anxiety is, because we hear it dished around quite a lot, and I think it'd be good just to have a foundational breakdown of what it is first, so that everyone is aware of what we are talking about when we say anxiety?
Okay. So I have been thinking about this, and my first response was going to be, what is it to you? But I'll go with the other one first. But what's interesting is, in that thought, what came to me after that was actually, it is so vast, it is so different, and it means so much to so many different people, and it manifests in such a different way, you know, and oftentimes anxiety is something that we don't even appreciate or understand that we have a lot of the time. And it is one of those things where, you know, we try to understand what really is this thing. Can we narrow it down? Now we can, because, you know, there are professional terms and ways of looking at it, which I am going to just mention and talk about a little bit so that we have an understanding of where we're going. But I also want to just say that it's not limited to what I'm going to share. It's so deep and it's so vast, there is so much to it. And I'm literally just going to be scratching the surface for the sake of time. So first of all, one of the things I wanted to say is anxiety is actually quite a normal, it's not nice, but it is quite a normal experience, just like how we experience a range of other moods. It's quite a normal one among them. And what it is it's our response to, you know, to fears, it's our response to worries, to nervousness. You know, and it is actually quite important, because we'll get that sort of fight or flight thing from, I know I spoke about it last week. So when we're talking about anxiety, it's that response to any form of threat or danger, you know, and it kicks in, and in a way to help us. You know, oftentimes we do see it as quite a negative experience to have, but actually a lot of the time what it's trying to do is protect us in one way or another. And I know last week I gave an example, I can't remember what my example was last week, but you know, there are so many different things that we can think about, you know, where an anxious feeling may come up, and what it's getting us to do is to check in with, you know what, is this okay? Is this alright? Is this going to harm me, or is this going to help me? And that is something we should do, you know, so in that sense, it's a healthy thing to have. You know, if I was to put you on the spot with something that you weren't comfortable with and you felt anxious, that would be a very normal response to have, because it's something you're not familiar with, there's uncertainty, so that would be okay. And I think sometimes we overlook that when we think about anxious feelings. But it can be heightened, it can also be inappropriately activated, which can be quite destabilising for us, which I was saying also last week. And so oftentimes it's through things such as traumatic experiences, life stresses, you know, threat, those sorts of things can create that more unhealthier experience of anxiety that we all at some point will encounter. And the thing with anxiety as well is sometimes there isn't an identifiable cause. Sometimes we experience it and there is nothing we can pinpoint to say, well, this is why, you know, this is why I'm feeling anxious. And we just know this anxious feeling just comes over us, you know. And I got this little example from the Anxiety UK site, and I thought it was great, so I just thought I'd share it as well. They looked at anxiety as, so you have this, you know, you imagine a bucket. So we've got this little bucket, and the bucket is our life stressors. And so all the little water that drops into the bucket are all the things that become the life stressors, and they're contained within it. Now, it doesn't matter how small the drops are, all of them will contribute to filling up this bucket. You know, and what happens is, you know, sometimes we look at things and think it's so minimal. So even on the website, they give examples such as, you know, the school run or the commute to work. You know, or, you know, for example, I like to bake, you know, me and my daughter like to bake, and you're baking a cake and you haven't got the eggs. Or, you know, and it could be these little things that sometimes we see as, oh, you know, it's such a minor thing. But you've got to remember, it's entering into a bucket that's already got, you know, got water in, it's already got our life stresses in. And so what's happening is it's filling and it's filling and it's filling, and oftentimes it just takes one more thing, one more drop. And now what we have is a situation where, you know, it's overflowing. And when we find ourselves in a position where it's overflowing, you can almost see it as, you know, this is a point where that anxiety level now sort of kicks off, you know, and now we almost can't contain all those things that we've had piling up over some period of time, you know. And what this site talks about is, you know, being able to have holes, you know, in that. And it's true, because realistically we're having things come in, but we also need to be able to have the space for things to come out. You know, so that it doesn't then fill up till it overflows, you know, and it can't be contained anymore. So, so that's one of the things that I was thinking about in terms of, what anxiety is. And we know that it presents, as I said already, in so many different forms. And even when I was doing a little bit of research into it for myself, there are so many names and types of anxiety. It is vast. And it's not just what we know it to be or assume it is all the time as well. So we've got things such as just, for example, we've got things like generalized anxiety disorder, which we know is almost the anxiety for anything and everything can create anxiety. We know that there's phobias, so we know that's a particular object or situation that you might fear. And oftentimes it's seen as the things that other people may not. So it's not a shared thing where we're all afraid of it, but for you it might be specific fear, which then becomes a phobia. And there's also health anxiety, which a lot of people are suffering with, and even right now, particularly with what's happening in society. So that's now where people have this obsession with the idea of experiencing some form of illness. And we know, I think we touched on it last time, with things such as Google, it just sends these things through the roof, because on the one hand, it's great. It's great that we can think, oh, I've got this, I've got this itch or that ache, and we can look it up, and we can think, oh, it's fine, because it looks like it could be this or it could. But also, we know that when I don't know about you guys, but when you open up the medication box and it says possible side effects, sometimes you read them and you start to think, oh my gosh, should I take this? And, we do know that society does it. It's so open to us that health anxiety is one of those things we see so much of, because now people are self-diagnosing, whether it's physical or psychological illnesses themselves. We also know there's obsessive compulsive disorder, and so that's basically like obsessions that are repetitive, and then it's the obtrusive and the acts of having to keep doing that in order to deal with that fear or that concern that you're having. There's things like social phobia, for example, where people are afraid to be in social and public situations.
That's me.
Believe
it or not.
You're doing a good job at the moment, especially in lockdown.
I'll just my neighbour at church. Can I do it?
But that is a very real concern.
Yeah.
And lots of people, and it's funny because I think sometimes as well, we look at that as those that have agoraphobia, people that, so someone won't go out or can't go out. And sometimes we think that they're the ones that suffer with social phobia. And oftentimes we overlook the person that we see all the time, and oftentimes it's how do they cope? How do they manage to get up on that stage and sing or do? And that's why oftentimes we hear of people that are, sort of drug taking behind the scenes or self-medicating in other ways, and a lot of the time it's because they experience that anxiety that we don't believe they do. But behind the scenes they're doing what they have to do to muster up that courage to find themselves in social situations. I don't want to dwell on anything because I know we need to move on, but there's things such as separation anxiety as well, which is, where, and there's particularly for parents as well, just to note this one, where there may be a fear, a worry in leaving parents or your guardians, sometimes we experience this in children, we can't understand why they're acting out, and sometimes it could be to do with this separation anxiety as well, which is something to definitely look into. I won't dwell on that point right now. But it is definitely a thing, and I think and the reason I wanted to mention that one is because I know in this period where everyone's on lockdown, it's something we need to think about for when we come out of it. How do the children readjust, to those social situations, to being back at school, to being separate from parents, especially those that perhaps mum and dad was always working for, and now mum and dad's home all the time and I'm loving this, and then we're going to go right back to the situation where they're being sent off to schools or childminders, mum and dad isn't around anymore, just to be mindful of that one. And so some of the symptoms, I'll just give a few, because again, it's so vast. But some of the symptoms that I made a note of are things such as hyperventilating, so we know the over-breathing, increased heart rates, we know dizziness, difficulty in breathing, shaky, feeling sick, or even being sick as well. There's a freeze response. So, we have this fight or flight, people freeze as well. And hair loss, things such as hair loss that people don't realise.
Wow.
and it's very real, and it's that physical manifestation of the anxiety that we're carrying, which does manifest in our bodies. there are psychological symptoms as well that we experience. So oftentimes people with anxiety do feel as though they're about to die. You know, they feel as though they're going mad, I'm losing it, you know, something's gone wrong here. They catastrophize, you know, so can only see the worst in a situation as well, you know. And, you know, they might have a warped sense of their environment. So, for example, things feel like it's moving slower, or, you know, everything around them just is buzzing, and, you know, all these different things that people might say. And also how they see their relationships in other people. You know, so they can believe people, everyone's talking about me, you know, or everyone's looking at me, I'm walking out, everybody's eyes are on me, you know. These can be signs of someone's anxiety or fuel their anxiety as well. And at the same time as well, we know that there are behavioural responses as well, so things such as avoidance. So we know sometimes we're anxious, I'm just going to avoid that situation altogether. You know, and there's also dissociation. And I just want to say the difference, because avoidance is more, it's almost like, you know, you're trying to go around the situation. So we're avoiding it. It's there, and I'm going to look completely the opposite way, I don't see it. But when we're talking about dissociation, you could be right there in the moment, everything could be going on around about you, and you just left. You're physically present, but emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, you know, you've almost just left. You know, and there are lots of people, particularly those that have experienced trauma of various forms, that as a response and as a way to cope with the anxiety, they have learned to dissociate from what they're experiencing. They've learned, I cannot always physically remove myself, but I will take myself off, you know, in one way or another. And we also know, for example, excessive behaviours, so excessive eating, sleeping, you know, all those sorts of things come under it as well. I'm not going to go on any more about what anxiety is, because I have a feeling that the questions that we get are going to then talk about how we deal with them and those sorts of things, so I'm not going to go into that part of it. But that's just a slight introduction to what we're talking about when we say anxiety.
Do you know what? It's so interesting, because you kind of just throw around anxiety, but you don't realise that there are so many different types of anxiety now. There are so many different ways that one person may experience anxiety like this, and another person may experience anxiety like that, and it doesn't take away the realness that it is for each individual. Do you know what I mean? It's a very real situation that people have to deal with on their day-to-day lives now, and even going through this pandemic. I know a lot of mental health professionals are concerned with the spike that there's going to be with more mental health issues coming through as we as a country try to cope during this pandemic. That's really interesting. Have you got anything that you would like to share or add, Auntie Tuvia?
As you're speaking, you're talking about anxieties, and there's some obvious things. There's a lot of things that are not obvious. I'm the sort of person I wouldn't expect to be suffering from anxiety, but there are things that cause me to be anxious. And it was a long time before I could even recognise that, or even say, yeah, sometimes I do get anxious. Because you think it's this loss of breath, or this something very visual, or something that you would know that there is a silent anxiety, which I know I've experienced in times, and even now with the pandemic, and we're going through a normal life. When you hear the news, and there's too much news sometimes, you know, your mind begins to work, but you know, thank the Lord that the mind of Christ. And I've learned to know that's enough now, turn it off. But, you know, there was a time when I didn't realise some of the things that caused me to be anxious. You know, I still learned to work with them. I learned to overcome some things. And you can never say never, because you don't know sometimes what even triggers me. We've not gone through our whole lives yet. You know, so just recognising that there could be something that is a trigger, and you know, in our loved ones, people we're with, to be mindful that, you know, is there something changed? Are their symptoms different because they're not so pronounced or prominent? Sometimes I can see the little things now that I know better. So I'd say that.
I think that's a really good point that you made in terms of being self-aware to know what your triggers are, and setting self-boundaries as well. Sometimes, for some of us, watching the news at the moment is too overwhelming. It's not to, you know, disassociate yourself with what's going on or being in denial of what's going on. Sometimes we know, okay, cool, there's things out here. It is taking loved ones, it is taking people. We as a country are not handling it as well as we should have been handling it. And it is really difficult. So sometimes it's knowing, okay, how much news can I take? Do I need to be watching Good Morning Britain? Do I need to be watching do you know what I mean, every day? Do I need to be listening to Piers Morgan argue and debate with everyone? Do I need to be tuning in at lunchtime and then at the 6 o'clock news and the 10 o'clock news? Do I need to be doing all of that all the time? And then you've got the news alerts on your phone as well. When you tune, do I need to be doing all of that? Is that playing a part on my mental health? And is that triggering some form of anxiety in me that is quite avoidable to some degree? So I'm going to kickstart with some of the questions that we have had come in. One of the first questions we had by Instagram was, how do you cope when you are having panic attacks? It is a good question, isn't it? How do you cope when you have panic attacks? I know I shared a little bit about this last week, so feel free to tune in to last week's session as well. And I mentioned that one of the main things that helped me cope when having panic attacks or anxiety attacks was having people that I could call on in that moment that were aware that, okay, at the moment I'm struggling with anxiety attacks, and sometimes when it comes it feels like I can't breathe and this, that and the other. And what I need from you is to be able to remind me and walk me through it. Do my breathing, in through your nose, out through your mouth, count with me. Tell me what can you see around you, what can you hear, what can you smell, do those grounding exercises, and literally just jump into that moment. And as I was sharing as well, it's really interesting from being a counsellor and having to help people go through it, and then being on the opposite side now where you're going through it yourself and you're thinking, oh my goodness, I didn't know it felt quite like that. You can always empathise with people and understand and try to understand what it's like being in their shoes. It's not until you fully experience it and you realise that, hold on, when people do come to therapy, it is because they feel like they cannot do it on their own. And I knew that in going through dealing with anxiety, I knew that it wasn't something that I could cope with on my own. I needed a village, I needed people around me that I could be open and honest with to be able to say, you know, I need help. So that was really, I had really good people that were available where I could call them and they could help me with grounding exercises. So that was one of the ways in how I helped, how I coped with panic attacks.
But even as you're saying that, even as you're saying that, you had people around you. There were some people, I used to work in the travel industry, the high flyers. You're not allowed to be off your game. You're not allowed to be under the weather. You've got to be on it. You've got to be hitting it every day. You've got to be, you know, we was in the tourist industry and we used to travel writers and, you know, all sorts of people, investors and, you know, they weren't allowed to be off their game and neither was you. Yeah. And so that when you're in these high pressure jobs, stress is anxiety is a big thing. And some people didn't ever want to face the fact that, you know, they said, oh, I've got pain in my side, or this is happening and that is happening. And it's all down to being anxious about the next presentation or the next, you know, we used to have to negotiate like airline deals and hotel prices, all sorts of things. We had to do it in many different languages sometimes, and you had to present in a foreign country, you know, in another. And there was a lot of anxiety, but because of who people are or who they think they are, they don't trust to be able to turn to somebody. So you were saying you actually had people, but a lot of people don't have people, and they try and manage on their own.
And that's why I think it's so important to talk about this, because there are many ways to cope with anxiety, but not every way is a healthy way. Do you know what I mean? So it's really good to think, okay, what are the healthy ways that I manage to cope with anxiety, and what other ways are there, Dr. Amanda, that we can cope?
Okay, one of the first, so if we go back to what we're talking about at the moment, which is panic attacks, that was the question.
Yes, sorry, panic attacks,
And although panic attack is an anxiety disorder, I'm sorry, I just want to help with a little bit of the education a little bit, because it's like that rush or intense, that really immense sort of feeling that comes over your body and comes over your mind. And one of the reasons I want to distinguish it is because you can have anxiety, you can live with anxiety, experiencing it on a regular basis, but not necessarily have panic attacks. And you can be somebody who normally finds yourself quite okay, and maybe not necessarily an anxious person, and the situation that you're confronted with, all of a sudden you find yourself in this panic attack, which you can't understand because you don't ever perhaps see yourself as someone who is anxious. So I think, just being able to acknowledge that as well is important. And I think also as well, in doing that, I think a few of the important things I think to think of is that for this person saying, how do I cope, is let's look at some of the facts in it as well. And one of the things is that they are short-lived. So they do tend to last, sort of several minutes, maybe up to an hour, various things, and they can come on several. So it can be that you can have one now, one later, could you find there's a bit of a pattern forming where weekly I'm having them, or it could be just a one-off situation. And they are very, very frightening, but they're not dangerous. They're not usually dangerous. They're not associated with danger. But, and this is important, and please do take note of this as well, and this isn't to add to anybody's anxiety, but also just to acknowledge that, that if you do find those physical symptoms, are really pressing and coming on often, or does feel like it's for an extended period of time, then one of the things that is important is to get it checked out, because I deal with people a lot, and in the work where I'm not physically seeing them, but I'm talking to them online, and they talk to me about a panic attack, one of the first things I try to do is talk through them with it. What does it look like? What does it feel like? How long have you been experiencing this? And I mean, I'm not medically trained in that sense, but one of the things I do encourage them to do is to speak to their GP, or if in the moment it can feel quite intense, sometimes to call 111 just to get the symptoms checked out. Often I get the response, particularly now, of I don't want to bother them, especially with COVID. But there are many presentations that can resemble a panic attack and could be something else. So I do think as well that it's important to keep that in mind when we're experiencing anxiety, a panic attack. But there's definitely lots of techniques that we can use. So for example, there's we have got breathing exercises, and breathing exercises are great because usually when you're panicking, one of the things that happens is you're breathing really fast, really high, and it's causing the blood to rush to your head, and all of a sudden you're feeling quite dizzy, and now you're struggling to cope, or you'll find you're struggling to breathe, which creates problems in itself. So when you can center your breathing, when you can take time out, and I think I said last time that there are some apps that you can use that do countdowns for you, and they sort of give different images of when to breathe out and how to breathe in, and they can be quite helpful if you feel unable. We could try it, we could. So for example, if you'll just take a breath in, we're just going to breathe in between 1 to 8. We're going to hold it for a moment, and then we're going to breathe out again 1 to 8. Okay, when we breathe, when you breathe in, let's breathe in through our nose. Okay, 2, 3, 4. You still breathing in 5. So you breathe in too quickly. 7, 8, and then we're going to breathe out slowly through your mouth. Then release 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, what's interesting is like when you do, the first time it's like a quick breathing in, and you'll find it didn't last for 8. And it's important because what you'll find is the more you do sort of exercise, you should be able to slowly breathe in, and you should be able to get to 8, and you should be able to breathe. I mean, I'm just giving 8 as a number; it's not necessarily 8, but you should be able to, and that's when you can see actually my breathing is controlled. If you're finding and you can't, then you know that there's a problem. I need to slow it down. So there are breathing exercises. There's grounding techniques. Now, oftentimes, especially if your anxiety relates to some form of trauma, or you find, or a psychotic sort of episode, or hearing, seeing things, or all the different things that people can experience, it can be quite important to be able to ground yourself. And by grounding ourselves, what we're really talking about is being able to bring ourselves back to here and now, bring myself back to what's happening for me. Because oftentimes when we find ourselves in that place, our minds race, we go off to different places. If we have experienced some sort of trauma, something, we can find ourselves, going back to certain places and certain events and times, or someone in a fight, could also, I feel really hot and I can't take this and I'm struggling, and so it's, when we're talking about grounding exercises, there are so many, but it's things, for example, you could just notice what's around you, so you could say, okay, well, 5 things that I can see, and then you talk about the 5 things that you can see, you can add description to them if you want, you might say 4 things that I can hear, and then you might say, okay, 3 things that I can smell, 2 things I can touch, what's one thing about me that, I feel proud of today, or something, and what we're really trying to do is just bring ourselves back to here and now rather than whatever that thing is. There's talking, talking, as we've said already, which is a major help when we are having a panic attack. Oftentimes, being able to just reach out to somebody they may not necessarily understand or even know how to help. But I think sometimes being able to get out of our heads or our experiencing sometimes and just be able to just share with somebody else can be really helpful in itself in grounding us. And obviously there's things such as positive distractions. I think you touched on something like that before. So, we want to know that what we're distracting, what we're using as a distracting technique is a helpful and healthy one. Do I need to go for a walk? Taking a bath, is that something that I can do right now? I really enjoy playing music. Can I go and play the piano, create a song? There's those sorts of things that we can do. And I think what it's about really is allowing ourselves to, yes, we acknowledge that this panic that I'm feeling is real. This is what I'm feeling. But it's about being able to find ways that we can cope with it, rather than just completely ignore it, or rather than feel terrible about it, or try to find a negative way to cope. It's about just realizing this is here, this is real, and what can I do to help myself to get through this moment.
Thank you. All right, we have another question here. Thank you for sharing that, Amanda. There was some really, really helpful tips and stuff in there that I know that people are going to be able to write. Like, get your pens and your notepads out, your notes in your phone, because these are tips that we're going to have to be using in day-to-day life. More and more people are struggling with anxiety and not quite sure how to deal with it, or if somebody else is struggling with anxiety. You could be in your workplace and someone's having an anxiety attack, and these tips and things like that can help you with how to support during that time as well. So one of the questions that I have, it says, I'm a part of the pastoral and prayer team at my church. I have found that more and more people need prayer for anxiety. Is it a spirit that I need to cast out, or are there more aspects to this that I need to take into consideration? Please advise how we pastors should deal with this.
Well, I'm going to jump on that just a quick bit. The Bible tells us that we're not to be quick to lay hands on people and to be casting out demons and devils and that sort of thing. In your church or in your fellowship, you get to know people, and if it is, you're part of the pastoral team, again, safe places, again, where people are in relationship, where you can find out if there is another deep-seated problem. It might not be deep-seated, it might be something that's just come up and you want it to be dealt with, but just because who you are, it doesn't exclude you from getting the help that you need. Everybody, our titles don't come first, so everybody needs help, everybody needs a confidant, everybody needs to be able to alleviate any kind of anxieties. So I would say that you need to be in fellowship with people that have got your heart. It's not a conversation piece, or it's not for to cause more stress. You need somebody to speak to. So I think it's about relationship, finding out if there's something more that's taking place. Is it a new thing that's just happened? Is it something old? I wouldn't just run straight to find out about demons. There's a lot more practical help before we get to that place that we need to investigate to get to that place.
Definitely.
That's what
I think as Christians we need to take a holistic approach to mental health issues.
Yes.
There is always our first point of call is to pray.
That's
Not
right.
necessarily to be casting out and laying hands and this, that, and the other, but to offer prayer of encouragement, to offer prayer of peace. Do you know what I mean? Where people's minds may be troubling them. I think what we need to improve on as a church in terms of, answering a question and giving advice is follow-ups.
Yes.
So if someone has said to you that, I'm struggling with anxiety, can you pray for me? And they pray for you, how are you following up? Are there organisations that your church is linked with you can say, I really think you should, contact Mind or contact the Samaritans, or do you have a number I've got a number for this counsellor that I know, or there's a Christian counsellor or just a normal counsellor if you need to speak to someone. Even advise, go and speak with your GP. We as leaders in our churches need to be able to be confident enough to say to people, yes, pray, but go and do something else about it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And having those follow-up conversations, because it doesn't take away from your spirituality to tell someone, actually, I do think it would be really good for you to go and see a counsellor. And following up that way. So I think in advising this pastor with what they're saying, I think that you should encourage the members of your church and do provide prayer, do provide support, but at the same time also follow up with aftercare. Do you have people that are checking in on this person? Are you doing one-to-one sessions and meetings with them? Have you advised them to move linked with another team or another church or another organisation that can step in and help with things like that? So that's what I would advise.
Yeah, I think I agree with what both of you said so far. I think last time we were here, I know that I was saying that I believe that we have to deal with things on a psychological and a spiritual level. I believe as Christians, I don't think it's wise I personally don't think it's wise to have one and omit the other. I think we have to, everything that we're dealing with within our lives, we have to be able to look at from both perspectives. Because we know we know where the scripture tells us we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. So we know that there is a spiritual realm, and we know that there are things that are going on, and we know that we are as a people, under attack. So we can't deny that fact. But at the same time, as I said last time, we are human, we are spiritual human beings, and we also know we were born and shaped in sin and iniquity. We know that we feel and experience pain, and we know that that while we're living this life, we will have to battle with those too, and that they are in contention, because there are the things that we want to, as Paul said, there are things I want to do, there are things I do, and we know there is a wrestle going on. And so I think when somebody comes to us and they might say, I need prayer to deal with anxiety, there may be times when, and this is just my opinion, there may be times when we may have spirits that we need to deal with. But also I feel that in dealing with them, it isn't necessarily always just about the binding and rebuking, but it's very much like we said, following up with people, seeing people through, walking people through the situations that they are facing. Because I agree with you, we should be able to refer people on and tell people where to go, but at the same time, if we're talking about looking after somebody's spiritual being, and as well as their physical being, we also need to know where we're referring them. And I think one of the issues that we have as a church, and one of the things that came up in one of the researches that I've done 2 research, and one of them looked at how do we understand psychological versus spiritual distress. And I asked sort of GPs and counsellors and psychologists, and it was interesting because they all said that there was a huge dilemma, and that was for them as practitioners. And then when I did the other research looking at church leaders and their experience, a lot of what came out was actually often I'm working outside of my remit. So there was an understanding for the fact that I'm here to deal with the spiritual, but I don't necessarily know how to deal with that. And the clinicians I spoke to were saying, well, I have a faith too, but I can see this big dilemma and tension. And I think it is a very real tension we have to deal with, and one that I feel we have to deal with in context. And I feel that, as leaders, oftentimes there's so much expectation, expectation on us to have the answers and the solutions. And oftentimes the solutions is to pray, we know this, to seek and to pray, but it may also, as you quite rightly said, mean that we have to consult other people. And this is where I think it's healthy for us to know who we're consulting to, and to walk, as I said before, and as you said, walk through things with people so that we're not just leaving people out there, because yes, there's support out there, but who are we referring them to? How are they are we referring them to someone, say, okay, deal with your physical man, but now we're abandoning that spiritual wrestle that was going on. So I do think it's important to take note and to acknowledge both sides.
Absolutely. I think that those are some great points you made there in terms of looking at it holistically. So I hope that we have answered your question. And I know that a lot of pastors and leaders are, like you said, feeling a little bit out of their remit when it comes to dealing with mental health issues and things like that. And it is important to kind of get clued up as much as possible. I'm not saying that you have to know everything about every little condition going, but have some sort of awareness in talking with people so that we can empathise. The last thing you want is when you're struggling with anxiety for someone to turn and be like, just pray about it. Or where's your faith? Or where's your trust in God? Do you know what I mean? And those are some real answers that people have had when they've been take authority over it. Okay, that's great. But how do you do that? Read your word. No. I need you to break it down for me, because when I can't breathe, right? Do you know what I'm saying? How is that helpful? So I really think that in terms of like in the church perspective, is having different ways of how we can do that. And I know it's 8 o'clock, so I know some people may be leaving to clap for the NHS. So give them a little round of applause, and thanks to our NHS workers and our key workers. We do remember you during this time, and we are grateful for all the sacrifices that you have made and are making during this time. So a round of applause to the NHS and our key workers. Moving on to the next question. Where am I going to go from here? What are the effects anxiety can have on someone's life if not managed correctly?
Ooh. Shall I go first?
Yeah.
Okay, so anxiety, as we know, can, even within, I said earlier that there was lots of different presentations and lots of different symptoms. And so for a start, we know that those can intensify. And not only can they intensify, but we can actually find ourselves developing more psychological disorders. We know that anxiety oftentimes comes with depression. So used to now, as I'm sure you were working as a counsellor, it's usually anxiety and depression. They tend to come hand in hand. And so we know that it can lead to additional mental health issues. We know also that it can lead to negative coping mechanisms, so things such as self-harm, finding other ways to medicate and to calm, so finding vices such as drink or drugs, because especially I know some people find things such as marijuana, they say, it's a calm, so when they're feeling anxious and under pressure, those are the vices that they will go to. We know also that it can lead to things such as hopelessness and helplessness. And we know that with those experiences, especially as they grow and intensify, we know that that can lead to things such as suicidal feelings and oftentimes, sadly, suicide itself. And also, when we don't necessarily deal with anxiety appropriately, another thing that we see quite a bit of is a misuse of support systems. And that can be in the form of, overusing emergency services, which is something we deal with quite a lot. And it's sad to see, I don't feel angry at people that are doing it, but it's sad, that they are in that constant place of distress and anxiety, and they're overusing, 999, always needing to call the police out, always needing to call the ambulance out. I was watching something just last night, actually, and they were looking for this lady on the street. You could see a little bit of their frustration, and you can understand because, they were busy and had other things to do, and, I could see that they almost felt like, now we're being called out for this lady again. But it was really hard for him. You could see that this anxiety is real, but when we're not dealing with it, sometimes those are the sorts of results, and it's not just the emergency services. It could be, family members or church, or, and it's not that we shouldn't reach out. I would never discourage anybody from reaching out for support if you are experiencing anxiety. I would never say to anybody, don't, call on help. But I think when we're talking about, what the effects can be if not managed, You know, you can find people that almost live in a constant state of distress, constant anxiety, and sadly, you know, those around can't necessarily understand that, and sometimes see it as, you know, somebody's a bit too much, draining, they can't cope with it. You know, and on the flip side, the other thing that can often happen is people turn in on themselves. You know, so when they can't cope with their anxious feelings, sometimes it's not that they go out and always are seeking help, but sometimes they just completely shut off. You know, and because they don't know how to cope and they don't know where to turn to, and they often, again, you get a lot of people that say, oh, I don't want to burden anybody. You know, I don't want to keep burdening my friends and family. I pick up that they don't want to hear this anymore. And so what happens is people internalise and they stay and they suffer in silence, you know, and that just allows that just gives the right environment for that anxiety to just continue to grow and to feed itself, you know, which sadly oftentimes does result in you know, decreased mental well-being as well.
And my thoughts turn towards the people that do have to support them, or support people that, you know, you're asking about what are the effects. There's effects in the family, there's effects with children, there's effects with neighbours, or, you know, that where's that one again? You know, and they're known in the community, or, you know, and depending on the types of medication or whatever, some people become, you know, beggars in the street just to try and, you know, get drugs or alcohol, whatever, to cover up. But my thoughts turn to the families. You know, they may have children, they may have siblings, that this all affects parents, they might be a parent, you know, so these are the things that I think about. And then, as you say, the help that they can get, and the help they don't want to get, because they feel sometimes they might be a burden, or it's just me again, you know. So my thoughts are with those that surround them, those that support them, people who have different needs, and to get to the root of it, because in turn it affects everybody, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. So the question was, what are the effects anxiety can have on someone's life if not managed correctly? And I think that sometimes in terms of managing anxiety, it's not a quick fix. Sometimes it's a process of finding different ways in how to manage. Sometimes anxiety could be situational based, so there's just a situation that you're having to deal with for a certain amount of time that's causing a lot of anxiety, that's causing a lot of pain. And once that situation's over, then you're kind of finding your normal and getting back to things. I think in terms of how it can, what was the question? The effects it can have. I think exactly what you said in terms of families. I noticed, personally speaking, that even with myself when I was struggling with anxiety quite bad, that it started to alter my personality. I struggled to sit down and hold conversations. I struggled with normal things like eating around the dinner table. It would feel a little bit overwhelming for me, and I could just manage a little bit, and I'd be like, okay, cool, then I'll go back to my house. And little everyday things can seem really difficult. Like I said, holding conversations, I'm not a massive extrovert, but in a one-to-one conversation, I'm quite alright to, you know, sit down and talk with people, and I found that really difficult. In terms of how it affected going through that season, it got to a point where I had to be signed off work because I could no longer function in doing my day-to-day job whilst trying this having on me personally. And it wasn't that I wasn't managing it correctly, it was taking a while for those managing techniques to kick in for me to be at a point where I said, okay, I can deal with life again, I can move forward, I can go back to work, I can function, I can do this, I can do that. And I think sometimes it is really difficult even to get to a point where you recognise that this is affecting me, and what are the effects? And also, what are you going to do about it? Because there are many people that are dealing with anxiety or dealing with depression and things like that, and they're not doing anything about it. And it's not sometimes that they don't want to, sometimes they may not know how, so I am, you know, aware of things like that, but it's also looking at, okay, how does this affect my family? How is it affecting those that are around me? How is it affecting my loved ones? How is this affecting me in the long run? And I think that's really important to look at. This question then goes on to say, next question. My friend is currently going through a difficult time and is struggling with anxiety. What can I do to support them?
I think, we've hopefully explained a little bit about what anxiety is and how it presents and how people experience it. And I think what you both have touched upon, about how a family, how it impacts upon a family is so important. And it's the same for family or friends, when you're that person who's trying to support somebody who's anxious, it can be very difficult. One thing I learned in my earlier days of training was that oftentimes, as people, so for example, if you're over there in tears, what's the first thing we're going to do? We're going to try and consult with, let me get tissues, let me give you a hug, and oftentimes you think, oh, I'm helping, I need to do something to be seen to be helping. And the other thing is, yes, it's because, we care about this person, we don't want to see them in distress. But the other thing is if you think about it, it's difficult for us to sit with another person's distress. And it can leave us feeling a bit helpless and hopeless as well. And so I think one of the first things is just simply being there is so key. And knowing how much you're supporting somebody by listening, by being able to sit with them, by making yourself available if they need to call you, if they need to meet up with you once we're out of quarantine. Then these sorts of things are really helpful. Because actually oftentimes people don't necessarily want to hear those kind of cliche words, oh, you'll be okay, get over it. So oftentimes people hear that all the time anyway. And what they really need to hear is, how they can, that they're there, you're there, and that you care, and that you want to listen to whatever it is that they have to say. So I think that is a vital part in just simply being there if you don't know, and try to understand what's happening for them the best you can, and don't be afraid to journey there with them.
I think the key, what you said, is listen, and even if they're not saying anything, you're still listening. Yes, there's a lot to be heard in the silence, to listen and to be able to, you walk with them, and as you say, you stay with them, and every sort of encounter, every meeting that you have with them is, it's important, because they can then, know that you're there to help. And even if, like you say, you just sit with somebody, that is the biggest thing you can do. And slowly people begin to open up. And they find solutions for themselves sometimes in the silence, because, you would bounce yourself off of, well, what did you hear? And more time they speak to themselves in the situation, and they come up with the right answer. And so it's not always just to be saying to people what to do all the time. They, sometimes they can take the first step by themselves if you're just there to hold their hand. So,
absolutely. I think it's important to also be yourself with how you're helping your friend as well. When I mean be yourself, so for example, when I was struggling with anxiety, Auntie Tuvia came and said to me, look, when you're free, I'm coming to your house and we're going to pray. And that was Auntie Tuvia being Auntie Tuvia, and that is exactly what I needed in that moment. Another week, another lady came to church, and I wasn't at church this week, and she messaged me, she said, are you home? I said, yeah. She said, right, I'm coming round. And she turned up on my doorstep with a bottle of wine and crisps. And that was what I needed at that time. And it was, what you offer with different people. We have different people in our lives that can offer different levels of support and different areas of support. And it's knowing that, okay, as a friend, what do they appreciate me? What do they appreciate about me the most? And what can I offer at this time where they know that I care? I'm not, reaching out and trying to be the super psychotherapist and I'm trying to help them with this, that, and the other and do all the research. But they know that, okay, you can call me and we can chit chat and I can just be normal with them. So I would say, in terms of supporting your friend, be normal. Be yourself. Don't over spiritualize it too much. Just be normal. I can't overemphasize that enough because I just feel like sometimes people slip into something random that's just not them. And sometimes, they're not so far gone when they're like, oh, they'll just take any advice. And so you'll be like, okay, cool, you just calm down a little bit. Does that make sense?
Can I just add another thing to that as well? Try hard not to judge, not to judge them, how they're coping, how long they're taking. You know, I think with things such as anxiety, a bit like what I often hear as well with grief, you know, people do have a lot of expectation. You know, should we go for this by now? How come you're still feeling that? Why is this still? You know, it's you know, it's one thing to know what to say and how to say it, but it's another thing to walk through something.
Yes.
You know, and I think it's easy to look at somebody else's situation and say you should be able to, you could be able to. Why isn't this? Why? You know, I don't get you today. I don't understand why you behave like that. You know, and I think, you know, being able to park our judgments, to park some of our thinkings about how we perceive things, and just try to understand what they're saying as much as you can. You know, that can be so vital to validate how somebody feels. You know, just to let them know how you're feeling is how you're feeling today. I might, in my head, think that's a bit off key, but actually, this is where you are right now. You know, because another thing is, if we are judgmental, what happens is we silence people.
Yes.
Because people don't feel that freedom to come to us and just say, you know what, this is where I am today. This is what I did. This is what I'm struggling with. You know, and I think anxiety and panic are things that from the outside it doesn't make sense to other people. You know, you're panicking. Why would you be panicking over that? Why are you know, just slow your breathing down then. Just you know, but actually it's so much more than that. So please just remember judgment, not to be judgmental.
Yeah, absolutely. We understand it. This flows into another question that we have, and I'm going to be wrapping up in about 10-15 minutes. So, there are many scriptures in the Bible which command us not to be anxious, but anxiety is something I come up against all the time. I feel like I can't talk to anyone in my church about how I feel, because I feel that anxiety is a reflection of having little faith. What can I do? Aye! That's a bit hard.
I'll go back to Amanda's question, answer where she was saying not to be judgmental.
Yeah.
You know, it's not about not having faith. It's about being in a crisis at that moment. And, you know, church family, let's have some grace. Let's have some long-suffering for the people. Because sometimes you can come into church and there's an expectation that, you know, you've got everything that you need. And where's your faith? It's true, it's just that there's non-empathic, is that the right word?
Yeah.
You know, we want to have empathy and we want to empathize and say, oh yeah, I understand. But at the same time, how you ain't got that level of faith yet? Or why don't you, you know, it's time to get over that. You still there, you still on that, you know. So yeah, it's not about your faith. It's, you know, it is about understanding that there is a crisis in this time, and what can we do? Who can we turn to? And like I say, that, you know, there's always somebody in our ministries, in our churches, that is always available. They are sought out, and you will find them. And, you know, use your faith to find them. That's just, you know, no, that's just a joke. Yeah, it's not about spiritualizing it. And again, that statement says that we're being put pressure on to be a certain way by now, which is the same thing that can bring an anxiety because you haven't got the freedom. It's not necessarily about faith. You know, it's about growing and knowing that I'm in a situation right now where it's not always going to be like this, step by step, you know, and we shout on, haven't got the faith for it, and that can just knock you right back, because we use some particular words as well which are not encouraging, to raise some anxieties. They have done for me in the past, some of this cliquey sort of church, you know, jargon. Have you got faith? You got faith for that? No. We work through it.
This question I love, because I think, first of all, I think it's so important to acknowledge that it's not just as congregation that we experience this, I often think about those on the pulpit, those who have to deliver the word, and how it can be for you when you're up there, you're saying to the people, this, have faith and etc. And you're thinking, perhaps I need to go to the altar and kneel before it myself, because right now I'm not too sure, where my faith is, because we all get shaken by things and we all find ourselves anxious. And so, there is this expectation. There certainly is an expectation that, yes, we should have faith, and this is what faith looks like. And I think that oftentimes what we're saying is faith means that there is no fear, there is no anxiety. And actually, this question is very right. There are lots of scriptures that talk about, not being anxious. But, do not be anxious for anything. We're commanded, do not fear. We have a scripture that says, which one of you can add a single hour to his life, by being anxious, don't be anxious for tomorrow. The scripture says it over and over and over and over again. And personally, what I feel is that I believe that it's put in there strategically. And I think it's strategically placed in the Bible so many times because God knows this. Yes. God knows us, and He knows that we experience fear and anxiety. And He's just continually reminding us, that, I know you're going to go through this. But guess what? That's why when you read your Bible, it keeps on telling you, do not fear, do not worry. It's not that you're not going to have that. I believe God placed that in there because He knows we will have that. And we will experience those feelings. The other thing I feel that God has done is He also gave those instructions, those commands through those that wrote the words in the Bible. Because as much as there's those scriptures that talk about do not fear, can I just share a couple as well that also, speak otherwise? Because, if you look, for example, I've just got a couple that I've managed to find that I think are helpful. So, for example, in Proverbs 12, verse 25, it says, anxiety in a man's heart weighs him down, but a good word makes him glad. So to me, what that's saying is there is anxiety, and when that anxiety is in your heart, it's a weight. God understands that. But what He's now saying is, okay, so let's speak life. Okay, let's speak positivity. Let's encourage. Just like in Psalms 34, verse 7, it says, when the righteous cry for help, the Lord hears and He delivers them from trouble. So now when we're experiencing that anxiety, what God is saying, guess what, I'm going to deliver you. He didn't say that you're not going to feel that. He's saying, I can deliver you in that place of anxiety or from that place of anxiety, and just a couple more, because I feel that these are the sort of things that are important to allow people to hold on to. If we look at 2 Timothy 1 in verse 7, the scripture reminds us that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of a sound mind. To me, what that says is, what? God has given us the power to overcome, and also He wants us to have peace in our minds. He wants us to set our minds on Him. He wants us to know that our confidence is in Him, and in His love for us as well. So again, it's not saying that, these things aren't going to come up against us, but it's saying, but these are the provisions that God has made for us, and the last one, because I don't want to dwell too much, but it says, 1 Peter 5 verse 7 says, cast our cares on Him because He cares for you. And what that's also saying is, we have cares, we have anxieties, but what God is saying is, guess what, cast them on Him because He cares. He didn't say, don't have them. He didn't, that's wrong, you should. He said, I see it, and I know you're experiencing that, but what I want you to do is cast them on me because I care for you, And so what He's really saying is, you don't have to carry them, let me carry them. But what He's also saying is, when they're hard to let go of, I believe, He's saying, I will carry you. Which reminds me of even, remember that famous poem about the footprints? When it talks about, when I was at the darkest spot, why was there only one set? Getting all upset and mad, and actually that was the point, that you were being carried. And I think God understands that we can't carry this, and that, I just wanted to also say, there's just one point that I thought was important to just leave with people, is that for me, when we're talking about anxiety, I would say that the solution is not necessarily to avoid the feelings or necessarily the absence of anxiety, but it's managing what we can, and at the same time, it's finding ways to release what we can't. So it goes back to, when I was telling you about that bucket, and the holes in it. Those holes for us, maybe some of those techniques we talked about, those holes, maybe, trying to reach out and find new ways to cope and new strategies. But as well, those scriptures, let's be reminded that the strategies can be found within knowing that, yes, I'm experiencing this, God, and I still have faith. Please don't feel that you do not have faith because you're experiencing anxiety. Because just know that you have a God who knew you would. That's why he's put this there. He's put this there because he knew you would experience anxiety, and he's given you answers in him.
That's amazing, thank you. Wow, a lot of things that we've covered today, and if you've just tuned in or you're watching the replay, just to go over a couple of the things that we've covered today, we've looked at managing panic attacks in the moment. What can we do? What are the exercises? What are the tips that we can do? What are the things that we can do to manage anxiety attacks and panic attacks in that moment? We've looked at anxiety from a church perspective. If you're a church leader and someone in your congregation is struggling with anxiety, what can you do? Where can you refer them to? What are the best ways to speak to them? How to speak to them? We've looked at if you're a friend and you've got someone close to you that's going through anxiety, how can we support them? So if you've just tuned in, please go back and have a listen to these different things. There's been a lot of different ways that we've kind of picked apart anxiety this evening and had a look at how can we practically deal with anxiety. All right? So just to close, I just want to have a quick look at the last thing that I thought was really, really important to just kind of close on and look at. And it says, how do you know when you need more than prayer to deal with anxiety, but a medical intervention too? So how do you know when, say for example, you are dealing with anxiety, how do you know when is the time to acknowledge, okay, there's an issue here and I need to seek help? That's a better way of putting it. And just to kind of close with that, Amanda, how do you know?
Okay, I was going to put it back on you guys again. But when to get a medical intervention, I think, as I think has been established today by everybody here, anxiety is an experience that we all encounter. And, it's not necessarily, as we've said as well, a bad thing or a long existing, thing as well. It can be dependent on the situation we're in, and it can be necessary within that situation. And I think I would say when it's impacting your life, when it's impacting those around you, last week I know we talked a little bit and I said what will always echo through everything I say is check in with yourself. And it's so important because I think, until we come to terms or until we come to understand what is happening for me, it's hard to know, hold on, am I anxious about something that, as I know, Charles, you said earlier before, is it something that I can do something about? Is it the situation that I'm in and I'm anxious about it, and actually if I did something about this, that would help to alleviate that anxiety? So are there certain things, have we tried those things, first of all, to understand where this anxiety is coming from, to look at, are there practical things that I can do to help alleviate some of that anxiety? Have I sought support from those around me? My family who love me and who know me and understand. Have I sought support from, my church, my leaders, my friends? And also as well, do a little bit of research. I know we spoke about Google and we can go too far with things, but sometimes I think educating ourselves and understanding things can be really helpful, because sometimes we don't fully understand what it is we're feeling and why it is we're feeling it. And there's lots of research on things out there now where we can get a bit of an understanding and an insight. And I would always say, give yourself the opportunity to explore those things. Because to be honest as well, if you go to a GP and you speak to them about it, these are the sort of things that they will suggest in the first instance as well. People aren't, against some of the myths. GPs don't just want to throw medication at us, so they will probably encourage you to speak to people, to try and find counselling, and then try and find out, what the issue is. So those sorts of things are important to do first. And I think, if you do find actually it is having an impact on me, it's impacting me and I'm not sleeping, it's impacting me and I'm not eating, it's impacting my mood, I find I'm acting out a lot. It's having an impact on my memory, having an impact on my behaviours. If we find that actually this is impacting who I am and how I'm interacting, and it doesn't always have to be the big things. One of the things I realise is avoidance can be quite major, and also just coping. You know, because we know that we can be really going through, but because we just cope when we do, and that's me. I'm a doer, you know. And sometimes it's not until you hit that point you think, oh my gosh, this is too overwhelming. And sometimes it can be too late. You've allowed it to get so far, but because you've filled that time and space with busyness, you haven't acknowledged what's happening. You know, but I do think any time we find ourselves feeling a little bit overwhelmed, it's important to check in. You know, and at those points to then be able to go and speak to your doctor, just to find out, you know, let them know what's happening for you. They will have checklists, they'll have various tests that they can do to just talk you through certain things and to try and understand what's happening. You know, and then from that point you can discuss with them, or they'll discuss with you if they feel something more is necessary.
Absolutely. Anything to add? No? All right, perfect. I'm going to close with a poem that I wrote about anxiety. I wrote this during a difficult time when I was struggling with anxiety, so I really hope that it helps somebody and it kind of shares what it's like being in that moment where you're struggling. And this is going to be in my book that will be coming out at the end of the year. Plug it in from now. So I'm going to share this. So it says, anxiety. Praise Jesus. There were times where it felt like the pain was suffocating me, taking over my whole body till I could hardly breathe. Psalms playing on repeat to try and get some relief. This was truly torturing me. First day back at work after summer break, I remember gearing myself up, unsure of how much I could take. I remember being so anxious, so fragile, so broken, awkwardly trying to hide the very obvious battle with my emotions. But then it got deep, got to a stage where I could no longer eat. Anxiety gripped me where the smell of food would make me heave. How did it get like this? How did my life fall apart so much that I struggled with the basics to live? How do I respond to my students when they ask, what's wrong with Miss? How do I keep going when I feel life being drained from me? How do I stop shaking as I remind myself how to breathe? How do I fight these panic attacks, this anxiety, this depression? Where was the peace God promised? That was my biggest question. And it's so funny because I wrote that in a time where I didn't feel God's peace. But months later now, I look back and I'm like, I was questioning God's peace? Like, what? And it's just an encouragement to say that if you are struggling with anxiety, you can kind of hear the place that I was in at that moment. And just to remind you that it doesn't always stay like that. You're not always going to feel like that. And anxiety is something that, you know, you have to daily work through. And it's something that I can say, you know, I have overcome and I do feel God's peace in my life now and peace in my mind. But it wasn't something that I experienced straight away. It was something that I had to seek after. So if anyone is struggling with anxiety at the moment, that poem was just to encourage you to say that was where I was and this is where I am now. And if God can do it for me, He can do it for you too. So I just want to thank everyone for joining in with us, for tuning in with us. Please share this with your friends and your families. I don't know what our topic will be next week or the week after or whenever we join again. But please let us know if there's any topics that you would like us to discuss. You know, we're mental health professionals and we're trying to bridge the gap between church and mental health. So if there is topics that you want to see discussed or questions that you want to see asked, please let us know. So thank you for tuning in to Restoration Talks and we will see you soon. Goodbye.